Good morning, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. Thank you for being here today. I want to let you know a couple of things. One, this webinar is recorded, and so I'll share the recording with you afterwards. And then second of all, there's a chat section here inside Teams that allow you to type in a comment or a question. So if during the webinar, if you have any questions whatsoever, please send me a message there, and I'll do my best to take a look at it and then try to address it during the webinar. And so with that, we'll get started. My name is Hai. I'm co-founder of Affluence, the company behind Party Matrix. Hopefully you're here today because you're interested in learning about Party Matrix and then interested in learning how to become more effective at prioritizing your tasks as well as your emails. And that'll be the focus of our webinar. So I want to let you know too that this is an introductory webinar, and so we'll cover the basics of Party Matrix. We do also have a couple of other webinars this week on templates as well as on email management. So if any of those interest you, make sure you sign up for it. Then at the very least, you'll get a recording of it. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to this presentation here. Again, if you have any questions, send them in the chat, okay? So my goals for today, one, help you understand the basics of Party Matrix, and then two, provide you a framework to get the most out of PM with the least amount of work, because that's always our goal, right? And then thirdly, to help you envision what your work and life success may look like with Party Matrix. One thing I always like to talk about are the challenges that customers face. One thing I've noticed over and over again is that team members always have trouble understanding what's priority right now. It is so fascinating that with all the technology that we have, people still have no idea what others are working on and why. And so more than half of the people that we've surveyed struggle with this team prioritization aspect. And then the corollary to that is that it's actually very difficult to keep track on the status of work across many areas of responsibilities. If you're like many others that I've talked to, which is you no longer have just one area of responsibility, as in one thing that you're responsible for. Instead, you're juggling between multiple things that are actually sometimes conflicting. And so with all of that, how do you decide what to work on? How do you decide where to start your day? And given all these choices. And so vast majority of people struggle with prioritizing tasks within that context of so many responsibilities. And then thirdly, emails and meetings are just the bane of our existence, for lack of better words. It's just causing far too much context switching. I myself struggle with this constantly. I get a lot of emails, hundreds of emails per day. And so from that, I'm always looking at the emails. I'm like, okay, which one of these do I respond to? Which one of these can I delegate? Which one of these can I actually postpone? And then not only that, you're having meetings software like Microsoft Teams or Slack or whatever, and people are sending messages back and forth there too. And so what happens is that with all these software, all these things that's actually taking our time away, we're switching applications, we're switching contexts often, and it's very, very difficult. And so a lot of people, 2/3 of people struggle with prioritizing emails. And so if you get more than 5, 10 emails per day, I know that, it's not an uncommon challenge where you start losing track of the most important emails. So what is Party Matrix? It's a comprehensive email, priority, and project management software to help teams manage emails, conduct more efficient meetings, and get real-time status update on critical projects and priorities. At the end of the day, Party Matrix is a communication software. So I want you to be aware of that. Keep that in the back of your mind as you look at Party Matrix. And it is also just a piece of software. It will not solve everything for you, but what I'll try to my best to do today is show you how you can tackle some of those challenges that we talked about so that you can be more effective at prioritizing your task and at least be on top of things that truly matter. So how does Party Matrix help with each of these problems that I mentioned initially? First, it uses what's called the 4-quadrant methodology to promote effective prioritization. Now, if you're not aware of what that is, we'll go into a little bit more details around that particular approach, but it is just about surfacing up and communicating to yourself and to your coworkers what's really important. And so then you have one central place where you can see everything that needs to be done. And that's the key, right? Because if you don't have a complete perspective, then you cannot decide on what it is that's most important. Second of all, Party Matrix provide different views, such as the one-on-one, the agenda, the timeline, to help you understand what needs to be done within the right context. And so when we talk about context switching, we talk about many areas of responsibilities. Well, the best approach to understand what to spend your time on then is to narrow the focus at any point in time. So then you're looking at one area of responsibility and find out what you need to do. And then you need to switch context to, I'm working for client X. What are the things I need to do for them? And then finally, Party Matrix is probably one of the best and most integrated solution in the Microsoft Teams and Outlook ecosystem for very effective email and task prioritization. In fact, we have capabilities in there to turn emails into tasks, attach email to existing tasks, setting up rules and automations and so forth. And a lot of other solutions don't even come close. So what makes Matrix better is that we're also Microsoft 365 security certified across our web app, Teams app, and Outlook app. And so if you are trying to use Matrix across your organization or your IT team, and they're trying to approve it or whatever, rest assured that you can make that request, and our certification makes it so much easier to get our applications approved. So if you do use the Microsoft ecosystem, it's just another add-on. Second, we're constantly advancing the work that we have. And in fact, one of the things that we're doing is we're using AI to help you achieve your goals. So what that means is help you generate projects that you need to work on in order to achieve your goal, and then also providing you training materials and ideas and suggestions on how to use Party Matrix for your specific function and challenges. So one side note I want to mention here is if you are struggling with using Party Matrix, or you're struggling with project management and task management and priority management in general, and you want to share with us those challenges, we can actually send us a message, and we can actually send you back, training materials to help you tackle those specific problems. So we'd love to hear from our customers on how on the challenges they face and how they can use Party Matrix to tackle that. And then Party Matrix provide. Excuse me. Party Matrix provide what I call people-centric collaboration, which means that not only do you look at everything from a project standpoint, but also from the perspective of people. What are the things you have to do for each person, et cetera. And then lastly, Party Matrix is available as a standard SaaS solution, which is vast majority of people use that. But we also have HIPAA compliance, which is for healthcare or life sciences, as well as an Azure government cloud solution for state and local governments. So as you use Party Matrix more and you're expanding the software usage across your organization, and you need our enterprise solution or specialized solution, rest assured that we actually have those capabilities, but also across Teams and Outlook as well. Okay, so what makes Party Matrix effective? One, it helps you focus on what you need to work on now, what you need to work on later, and what you should delegate. And then finally, Party Matrix provide the one place everyone can go to know what needs to be done. So I want to, again, emphasize this last part, which is one, as you use Party Matrix, first, as an individual, Party Matrix will help you understand your priorities. But then two, as you use Party Matrix across your team, try to make sure that everyone knows that if there's a change in priorities, that they update it in Party Matrix, so then it becomes the central place to have everyone be on the same page. And that's the key. Okay. So I do want to emphasize some of those things. And so, not everything can be done by the software. It is, at the end of the day, up to you. And so I want to emphasize that part. And so with that, I'm going to go into the fundamentals behind Party Matrix. In case for those who aren't familiar with the 4-quadrant methodology, I want to start with the basic, which is, there's a famous quote attributed to former President Eisenhower: "What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important." And what I really like about this quote is it does such a good job of separating the dimensions of importance and urgency, right? So we very, very often get confused with urgency and importance. So what I mean by that is that last email in is typically the first email we'll respond, right? When you go check your email, what do? You look at the top of the list, and at the top of the list, you go and you respond that one first. Is it the most important? I don't know, but it's the last one that I just got, so I'm going to answer that first. And so that happens to all of us. And so we mix up the concept of importance and urgency. So the only way to overcome that is to take everything that we have to do and separate them out into these dimensions. So let me give you an example. Let's just say if you take out a piece of paper right now and you start jotting down everything you have to work on, everything, well, almost everything, because sometimes, there are some things that are so minute and small that maybe they don't require to be written down, or things that are always have to be done, they don't need written down, right? I don't have to tell you go drink water or eat food, obviously. But when it comes to priorities, imagine if you wrote down all your priorities across all your projects. Now, the second thing I want you to do is, if you look at that list, decide what needs to be worked on. You start at the top, you start at the bottom. And if you have trouble deciding, that's when we break it into the quadrants. So now what I want you to do then is take that list, and instead of putting into one linear list, we separate into these buckets. So in the top left, it's called the do now. These are the important and urgent tasks. Just think about the tasks that have to be done and then have to be done soon, right? That goes in quadrant one. And then quadrant two are tasks that are important but not urgent. So these are things that have to be done. They're really crucial to your goals or whatever it is that you're working on, your project, your initiative, but they don't have to be done at this moment. And so that goes into quadrant two. And then what are the things that are not important that you could delegate to others? And so that goes into the delegate box. And then finally, the stuff that you don't know where it belongs yet within the quadrant goes in the inbox. So then everything starts in the inbox. And then from there, you decide within those three other quadrants where they belong. And that's as simple as that. So at the end of the day, Party Matrix just takes this very, very simple concept and then use the software to actually help you achieve that. And then we add all the bells and whistles around delegation, around collaboration, around integrating with everything that you use. So that's all you have to think about on what Party Matrix is in a nutshell. Now, I do want to emphasize a couple of things from a philosophy standpoint as you think about how you spend your time. Obviously, if you have tasks that's in the do now quadrants, that's where you should always be focusing your time and effort. If you start your day before you check your emails, before you do anything else, start looking at your quadrant one and start going through the list and plan for that. Then what do you do next, right? Don't work on the stuff that's urgent but not important. You start work on the things that are important but not urgent. And so then Q2, which is the plan quadrant, is what you want to focus your time on. So one thing that I learned from a customer that was actually so insightful was that if you have all your stuff in quadrant one, that means you're constantly firefighting. That means you did not do a good job planning, and now everything is urgent and everything is important, and then nothing is because you've just completely, mixed them all together, and now you have to just work. So ideally, as you're planning all this out, don't have more than 25% of your things in quadrant one, and then don't have more than 25% of the things in quadrant two. And that's the whole goal of the Party Matrix, to make it extremely visual for you to see your priorities. Hopefully that gives you a sense of how this all fits together. Now, here's the next part. This is the reason why Party Matrix makes you successful, which is take this matrix that you've just built with all your priorities, organize into Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4. Take this list, walk around the office, and start comparing notes. So the 4-quadrant Eisenhower Matrix create alignment because it forces you to prioritize, right? So instead of walking around the office and showing your to-do list, you're showing your priority matrix. And success from using Party Matrix isn't necessary from finding what everyone agrees on. It's about discovering the disagreement on what should be a priority when it isn't. And so when you walk around the office with the matrix and you talk to your manager and you talk to your direct reports and you all look at it and say, wait a minute, I thought that this was higher priority or this was lower priority. And that's where all the magic happens, those powerful conversation on deciding what needs to be done and what should not be done. So keep that in mind, that, if you do that and you do get success from that, you're using Party Matrix correctly. Because if you have all this written down, all your priorities, but it's siloed, no one knows about it, and no one is in agreement and no one is in alignment, what's the point? So I want to emphasize that if you use Party Matrix for yourself, fantastic. Every day that you start with Party Matrix, you look at the software and you know what your priorities are. If you use Party Matrix within a team, compare notes constantly. Compare your matrix with others' matrix, have conversations around it. Okay, so with that, I'm going to jump into the demo and show you how to actually use Party Matrix features to actually tackle some of these challenges that I talked about. As mentioned, there's the chat section. So if you do have questions, feel free to send it. And if you don't send in the chat today in the webinar, you can always email me as well. And as I mentioned, the webinars are recorded and we post them on affluence.com/webinars. And then the other webinars that I mentioned around email management, as well as templates and so forth, you can also find them there to register. And then always reach out to us, support@affluence.com. We love to hear from you. We love your feedback. Those are the things that actually helps us understand what are the features that's important. And then also, if you get confused or if you find certain things challenging in terms of actually executing, those are the feedback we also want to listen to. Okay, with that, I'm going to jump to the demo and show you Priority Matrix. So here I have Priority Matrix open. So if you have Priority Matrix, you should see something very similar to this, which is in the middle, front and center is the quadrants. So here I have the web app open. You can get to the web app by going to our website, affluence.com, and click on web app, or you can click on, or you can go to prioritymatrix.com. And so you get the same view here. And so this is the web app. And so you see how everything that I have sort of goes into these 4 quadrants, right? I have the quadrant 1, the fire/do now, do later. And then quadrant 3, that's a delegate quadrants. You can actually customize it. You can change it to file or resources, and then the inbox. And so whenever I create a task, I have to decide what quadrant it belongs in. So let me give you an example. I'm going to create a task. I'm going to say follow up with webinar participants, okay? And then I'm also going to say due tomorrow at 2 p.m. So what's going to happen now is that when I click that add, it creates a task for me. And because I said due tomorrow at 2 p.m., our system interprets that and actually set the due date for me on December 6th at 2 p.m. my local time. So when you use Priority Matrix and you create tasks, definitely do this due date thing. It's so useful. I set due dates on every single one of my tasks. And the reason I do that is then I know what needs to be done when, right? So don't think about just tasks as a list. Think of tasks as the second dimension of importance and urgency. So if you don't know when something is due, then how can you figure out when and whether it's urgent or not? So that's why setting due dates is so important. And Priority Matrix makes it so easy for you to set that due date. So I could have typed, due next week, due in 1 month, due in a year, etc. So directly from there. Okay, so now that I've created a task in Priority Matrix, you see how it puts here in the quadrant here. Now, when I click on that task, it opens what's called the item details on the right-hand side. The item details is where you add information around the task. So if I'm sure you've used a bajillion task management software, right? Everything has a task name to it. Everything has a notes description. Everything has a person responsible, a due date, etc. Priority Matrix is no different from that. So what we have then is we have the project it belongs in. We have the name of the task. There's a couple things that's unique about Priority Matrix. I can go and I can star it. And when I star a task, what happens is I actually get a special report around it. So I like to star tasks that are very important. And that's what's really nice about it is it helps me stay focused too. And so it adds another dimension of importance to the task that I have. And then I have icons. So here, let's say because it's email, I'm going to go ahead and choose the email icon here. And then the owner, right now it's delegated to me. I created that task, but I can go ahead and delegate to another person if I needed to. And then next to that, I have progress, effort, reminder, and dates. As you see here, the due date is already set, but reminders is actually really neat. I want to emphasize the difference between due dates and reminders. Let's say you have a project that's due in 2 weeks. And then imagine you create that task in Priority Matrix and now it's due in 2 weeks. Well, 2 weeks come around and then you see the due date and you realize, wait a minute, it's going to take me 3 days to work on this project. How am I going to get that done? I can't get that done in 1 day. So that's the difference from reminders and due dates. You want to set a reminder to prior to when you want to finish that. But it's different from a start date as well, because start date means this is when you start, but reminder again is a way to surface it up to bring it to the top of the list. So then you know to actually get started. So I like to think of reminders as a cheat to make sure that you trick your brain into thinking that something is urgent, especially when it's important. So let me rephrase that. Let's just say if I have a bunch of tasks or a bunch of emails or whatever it is, guess what? The last one in is the one that you tend to focus on, right? So by setting due dates and reminders in Priority Matrix, what's really happening is that Priority Matrix will surface it up to the top of the list for you automatically. So then you know that, okay, I actually need to get this done. And so when you have something like that happen, it ensures that the most important tasks are worked on. So here's how I like to do it. So you see how I have reminders here? I actually type at the very bottom here. There's a little piece of, there's an input box here, and I can say, remind me daily. So what is happening now is that I've just set a reminder in Matrix to remind me daily to get this task done. And so if a task was truly important, this thing will bug me until I get it done. And it is so useful to do that. And in fact, when I create tasks for myself in my actual project, I always set due dates. I always set reminders. I tend to do reminders, I like the recurring reminders, because if with recurring reminders, if it's not done, it'll keep bothering me about it. And so, you obviously can click on this button right here and set the reminders, but I love typing it into the chat here because it's so easy for me to type remind me daily. So obviously I can type remind me weekly. I can type remind everybody daily, remind everybody weekly, etc. And the whole goal around this is to ensure that everyone knows to get started on it. I'll give you an example of how I use it as well. Let's say when I have to follow with a client, a customer rather, in a year, guess what? Setting a due date a year from now is like one thing, but what I always do is I would set a due date a year and then I set reminders in 11 months. And now in 11 months, it actually surfaces up. I'm like, oh, hey, I actually got to get ready for this so I can follow up with the customer. So powerful, so useful for things that are farther out. Okay, now as we go further down, there's the chat section, which you see that I'm starting to type comments in here. The chat section is exactly what it says, which is it's a place for you to have conversation with other coworkers as well if needed. But as you can see, I can also type commands, right? But if you have multiple people working together, it's a very, very good place to have communication, and it's stored within the context of the task. So often that we have meetings and chat messages sent back and forth, or text messages or emails, and we're talking about 15 different things. And then guess what? 2 months later, you're trying to go back and you're like, what did we discuss? And you've completely lost all that context. So Matrix has a chat, but it's within the context of this task. So then when you talk about this task, you have this conversation in here and you have a record of it. And when you go and look at it, you see exactly what you talked about and why and so forth. Not only that, this chat section offers the record of all the changes that you've made, such as setting due dates and so on. One thing I really like about the chat section is it offers a place for you to onboard new employees or new people who are responsible for the task very easily. They can go take over a task, read the chat section, and knows exactly everything about the task. So imagine you have something that's very important, and then over the course of 6 months, a year, you have all these history. Matrix keeps a record of that for you. Now, hopefully you're thinking about some use cases as I'm walking through this, and I'm highlighting the capabilities that I think are most powerful. And so that you have that chat right there. And then you have the notes section. This is where you can add subtasks and you can add basic information around the task itself. It is not intended to be rich text, because if you want rich text, that's what Google Docs or Microsoft Word is for. But then you can link those documents into Matrix. The notes section is just intended to allow you to create subtasks very easily here. And then finally, you have the resources section, which is where you can upload files, link to SharePoints, link it to Drive, or if you use other software, web apps or SharePoint or whatever, you can link it all here. So Matrix gives you one central place to have all of that tied together from a task standpoint. And that's what an item details is. And so every task has the item details. So let me give you some high level advice and suggestion here. One, if you use Matrix to create tasks, always set due dates, right? Always set reminders. And then when you delegate, you can set the owners here. And what happens is, if you need someone to be notified of all the changes that's happening to this task, add them as follower. So you saw how I created this task. I assigned it to Eugenia, but I'm added as a follower. So then when this task gets updated, I'll get notified. And that's pretty much it from a task standpoint. Let's go back to the matrix view. You saw how I added this task here in quadrant 4, as I mentioned. I could have added to any quadrant, but now let's just say I want to make sure that I know that this is important and urgent. Well, I just drag it up here to quadrant 1. And so now when I look at this and I start my day, it is so visual, right? And hopefully you get the same sense, which is, the problem with the linear list is it's a list, right? You have to decide where to focus your time and effort. The whole point of the matrix is that it makes it so it's so visual that I can see that I need to focus on quadrant 1. And so hopefully when you're using Protomatrix, move things around, shuffle things as needed, so make it visual for you to see that. And so instead of having one list, you have 4 lists. That's how one way to look at it. The other thing I like to do too is also I drag this here so then I can focus my attention on quadrant 1. I can focus my attention on quadrant 2, right? And so it allows me to actually shift my focus and see more of that list. But Protomatrix also gives you an ability to view all this data that you have from using other views. So as I mentioned in my presentation, we have the list view, which is where I can go and take all the tasks that I have and I can sort it, right? I can sort it by due date, sort it by modified date, sort it by owner, and so forth. What I like this list view for is for me to see the tasks that are overdue. It's so easy for me to see the things that are overdue because they have the red text here, and then I can go through each of them, either change the due date or fix it in whatever ways. So that's very useful. Then you have the calendar view. So the calendar view takes all the tasks that you have with due dates and then shows in a calendar format. Now, of course, things that don't have due date wouldn't show up on here, but if you were listening to my advice, you'd have due dates on them, right? And then afterwards, you can actually just drag and drop things and to change the due date directly from here. And of course, I can click on each task and open the task in the right-hand panel. And now if you want to go and actually look at even longer time horizon, then we have the timeline and Gantt chart view. So if you have tasks that spans across multiple days or multiple weeks, the Gantt chart views gives you a much, much wider range of days than just a calendar, right? So I can actually go all the way back from November, I can go into January, and I can see how things pan out here. And with Protomatrix, I can actually link tasks together to build dependencies as well. So with dependencies, I can say that task A depends on task B and so forth. So all of that is possible within the resources section. Okay, so that's within the context of the quadrants. I do want to quickly mention that in every quadrant, you have this option called the filters. And so sometimes customers want to ask questions like, hey, I have all these tasks in Protomatrix. How do I find out what I've done this past quarter? Well, why do you want to find that out? Easy. If you're doing a performance review, you want to prove to your manager, look at all the things I've worked on, right? Protomatrix gives you that view very easily. You can click on filters. You say finish items, and then you choose the dates from when you did it. And so that allows you to see all the things that you finished within a certain time horizon. Or also, you want to go and see tasks assigned to your direct reports and see what are the things they've worked on this past quarter, et cetera. So Protomatrix filter system is very, very useful to show you whatever information that you need. Generally, you just click on, clear filters, and so you only see the tasks that are open, but of course you can change it as needed. So now we've talked about the quadrants, we've talked about the item details. Let's talk about projects. So what are projects anyway? On the left-hand side here, I have a list of projects. You can think of projects in a couple of ways. You can think of a project as an area of responsibility, something you're working on, right? You can think of project as an actual project. For example, if you're a project manager and you're managing a project, well, that's a project in Protomatrix as well. But you might also have a, you would call, let's just say, an initiative. So let's just say if you have an initiative that says, hey, this quarter, we're going to achieve X. And then you create a project in Protomatrix, and now you have all the goals and tasks just revolving around that particular initiative in one central place. And then you can involve all the necessary people, and so they're on the same page. You might also have a project for a department. So imagine if you have a marketing department, all the marketing people might want to be on one project so they can see the entire department's priority list, right? And so when I think of projects in Protomatrix, I think of them as transient, which means they come and go, right? If you have something that starts, on a quarterly basis, that's a project that comes and go. You might have something that's what's called persistent, which means they stick around forever. So in our company, we have a project for each one of our applications. So our Teams app, Outlook app, Mac app, Windows app, iOS app, each of those have their own project in Protomatrix, along with all the tasks and features and work that we have. Of course, you can imagine those projects are massive. They've been around for more than a decade. And so they have massive lists of features and so forth. But it's so powerful because someone can take a look at that matrix and see everything that they have in the history of everything that we have for that project. It allows you to keep people on board, keep people up to date so easily. And then at the same time, Party Matrix hides everything that's not important right now. So that's a persistent project. So when you use Protomatrix, I have a couple of recommendations. One, I always think that you should have a personal priority project because at the end of the day, it's about you, right? You're here today because you're interested in becoming more effective at prioritizing your task. Therefore, you should have a matrix to just write down all the tasks that you have so you can think about it and you have a one place where you can take the stuff out of your brain and get it down on something tangible, even if it's digital. But Matrix just gives you a very good perspective on that. Then you should have a project for team priorities. And when I say team priorities, this is a little bit more flexible, but if you manage a team, you should have a project with all your delegates in there. And then if you're part of a larger team, you should have a project with your manager. So then your manager can look at it and see what are your priorities, right? And then finally, you should have another project around key initiatives or goals that you have for this quarter or this month or whatever it is. And so I think those are the three projects that you should always start with. And then from there, you can expand. So I have personally several hundred, I want to say like 300 projects or so across all of the things that I have. And it's, everything from, again, transient or persistent and so forth. But with Matrix, I actually can go and have a very easy time understanding what I need to work on. And there's a couple of ways. Let me show you how that works. On this left-hand panel, you see how I have my list of projects, right? I can jump between different projects. Now, when I choose a project, what happens is I can actually see what's called the project details. So we talk about the item details where we can edit information around the items. Well, the project details, let me edit the project itself. So I have the project name, but here's the cool thing. I can star a project. What happens then is when I star a project, it gives me a sense of, okay, these are the projects that are high priority, right? And then, of course, you have the tasks that are high priorities inside the project that are high priorities. So those should be the highest priorities, for lack of better words. And then down below that, you have the people, the team members involved in it. So when you create a project, you can have a project just for yourself. You can also have a project for you and multiple coworkers, etc. Anyone who's in this project gets full visibility into all the priorities. They can make all the changes and so forth. Matrix lets you create read-only views and so forth. But in general, usually my recommendation is just add the team members who needs to be in the project so they can see all the tasks. And then, they can go and mark tasks as done and so forth. You can delegate to them. And then below that, you have the quadrant names. Now, what's really neat is I told you about the Eisenhower Matrix and the do now, do later, and so forth. But in reality, Party Matrix is flexible. In reality, when you work with something like with Party Matrix, you might want to change the quadrant names to something that more reflects the way you work or the way your organization works. So we let you rename these quadrants to whatever it is that you need. So for example, you saw how instead of do now, I have fire/do now. So I can just click on each of these quadrant names to change it. I can also click on the quadrant colors and change it. Now, why do you want to change the quadrant colors? I like to change quadrant colors to maintain different themes for different types of project that I work on. So then on the left-hand side, it's very visual for me to see, okay, these are my, marketing projects. These are my engineering project and so forth. And then also you can actually customize this in a way that makes sense to you. So for example, instead of having a delegate box, you see how I have files and resources. Once you've made all this customization, you can go up to the top right here and save project as template. What this allows you to do is when you create projects in Matrix, you can actually choose from templates that you've created using the terminologies that you care about. In fact, we have several hundred types of different project naming conventions that you can use for free just by going to our website and then checking all the different matrices that we have. And the reason you have that is because you can think of anything that's in a 2x2 matrix, the 2 dimensions, importance and urgency, right? Those are 2 dimensions. But you can also look at effort and impact. right? That's another dimension. And so you've probably heard of strength, weakness, opportunity, threats. That's from business school, where you have you want to do market analysis, etc. So Party Matrix gives you that infinite flexibility. And then once you've created the projects that you care about or the naming convention you care about, you can save it as a template. Okay, so that's how you modified a project name. So now let me show you how to create a project. On the left-hand side here, under projects, I can go create project, right? Create project. When I create project, I have several options. The first, I have a blank project. When I create a blank project, literally the project will have nothing in it. I can just choose the project name. I can choose some basic templates here, and then I can choose a color. That's pretty much it. But I can also create a project from public templates. So I mentioned how we have hundreds of templates. Well, these are a few dozen templates that we've selected. And from here, you can actually choose one of these types of projects and create a project from those templates. And then you can also have my templates. And so these are project templates that you've created and you've saved within your organization. And so this gets shared across your team. So when you create a project template in Party Matrix, you can share with your team members, and it allows you to actually leverage each other's knowledge to become more effective more quickly. And then finally, you have the option to create with AI. This is actually pretty straightforward. It says type your goal, and when you type your goal in here, you press create. And so it takes around a minute or so, but our AI will actually generate a project for you based on your goals, along with suggestions on how to tackle that. So if you're interested in that, I recommend, during this webinar or after this webinar, open up your Party Matrix, sign in, create those projects that I mentioned, and then try one of the AI projects to see if it's something that actually could be helpful to you. Examples, let's say you want to be promoted, right, to a senior position. Well, type that in and see what Party Matrix says. Or let's say you want to improve your marketing or your manufacturing processes. Type that in and see what Party Matrix comes up with. So that's how you create a project. So now I've showed you how to create projects. I've shown you how to customize projects. I've shown you how to create tasks. I've shown you how to customize tasks. Let me switch gear a little bit and talk about emails, because that's the bane of our existence. We had so many emails. In fact, if you are like me, you probably get so many emails, and I'm guilty of this, by the way, which is I get an email and sometimes I flag them. It's great if I have only 5 flags emails, but if I have dozens or hundreds of flags emails, it becomes impossible to manage. So with Party Matrix, I can actually turn an email into a task. And then from there, I can actually set all those due dates. I can delegate, I can prioritize those emails. And I leverage the power of the matrix and put it onto the emails themselves. So let me give you an example. Here I have Outlook open. By the way, of course, I'm showing Outlook for web here, but Party Matrix has Outlook integrations for web, for desktop, for mobile, et cetera, all of those. Okay, so to get Party Matrix for Outlook, you simply go to the App Store and then click Add Apps and then choose Party Matrix, and then you can install Party Matrix and then sign in with the same account that you have. But of course, I already have Party Matrix installed, so I'm going to go ahead and choose Party Matrix here. So now I've taken an email, and from that email, I click on the apps, and then I click on Party Matrix. I have 2 options. I can prioritize this email or open Party Matrix. I'm going to go ahead and choose prioritize email. Now, look what happens. The right-hand side changes, and now I have the ability to turn any email into a task. All I have to do is click on capture email. But I can customize this a little bit. I can change the name of the task. I can change what project it belongs in. So Party Matrix just chooses a project for you, but you can decide what project it belongs in. Let me give you an example. Let's say you get a client email, right? An external customer sends you an email. Now, that email may involve a task, and you need to delegate to somebody. Well, this is where you go in, choose the project that is relevant to that customer, and then choose what quadrant this belongs in, right? If it's a very important email that's got to be done now, choose quadrant 1. If it's an important email but doesn't have to be done at this moment, choose quadrant 2. And then next to it, you can delegate to somebody else. So you can see how, again, in the beginning, it just delegates to me, right? Because I created it, but I can go and change the owner. Now, Eugenia will go and get a notification that I've created an email from a task and delegate it to her. And then, of course, set a due date, right? I can say due on that day. And then I just click capture email, and that's it. So the moment I click capture email, the right-hand side changes into the item details. And this is exactly the same as what you saw in the web app. What project belongs in, the name of the item, you can star it, the owner, you're a follower on this task. So if Eugenia updates it, you get notification, and then you get progress effort, you can set reminders. You have the chat section here. Now there's one difference, which is in the resources, that email is uploaded for me. So what's really neat is Eugenia, when she gets this message, she can actually open the email that I've attached. So then she can open that email, look at it, respond to it, etc., directly from her Matrix account. But let's just say that the customer sent me an email, but it actually belongs in an existing task. Well, Matrix is the only software that I'm aware of that lets you attach email to existing tasks as well. So sometimes it doesn't make sense to create more and more tasks, right? Especially if it's a follow-up. So instead of actually prioritizing the email, I can open Matrix, and now what I can do is I can attach an email to an existing task. So when I go to this view, you see it looks a little bit different. And I can search for a Matrix item, and then instead of creating a new task, I just hover over that item and then choose attach. So what that does is it'll take this email, attach an existing task, and then I can have 5, 10 emails, right? Bunch of Word documents, PowerPoint, etc., all linked together in one central place. And then we know exactly what priority that is because you know it's in the right quadrant and so on. But also Matrix, when you open this view, Matrix will show you that, hey, this email has already been prioritized. You can click open item here and take a look at it. At the same time, inside the Outlook itself, you see how this email has been prioritized. And so the tag Matrix shows up, very visual, looks just like a flag email. The only difference is it says Matrix. So personally, I prioritize a lot of emails just because I have to. Matrix has multiple ways of prioritizing emails. You can actually also forward Matrix into, you can forward any emails into Matrix as well. So every person, every account has an inbox address. So what that means is I can actually copy my inbox address and then I can forward my email to it. In fact, that's what I do all the time on my mobile device, which is when I'm out and about, I get an email from a customer, and now I need to make sure that I don't forget it, right? Again, I can't just flag it because I'll probably forget it within the context of everything I have. Or let's say I have to delegate it. I can actually forward that email into my inbox, set a due date, and then I'm able to prioritize that. So Matrix has a lot of flexibility, and also a couple other things, which is every project in Matrix also has an email address. So you can actually create all sorts of fancy rules that allows you to ensure that anything that's relevant can actually be associated within the appropriate quadrant inside Matrix. So that's how email integration works. Now, we also have integrations inside Gmail. It's not as powerful as Outlook just because of the way Gmail works, but by using the inbox address in Gmail, it actually works extremely well. Now I'm going to switch gears over to Microsoft Teams. So Matrix is probably the most integrated solution in Teams with respect to the features that we have. So the way you use the Teams app is you click on the App Store, search for Matrix, and install it. And when you do, you can click on Matrix here, and then you right-click and pin it. So I recommend, if you do use Matrix, pinning it inside Teams allows you to access it very easily. Now, as you can see, when I open Matrix inside Teams, it looks almost identical to my to my web app, right? And that's the point. You have your list of projects, and then you can click on a project and you actually jump into the details of the project. And this allows me to not switch contexts as often because, if you're in Teams and you're chatting with somebody in Teams and you want to add something to Matrix, I would hate to have to open the web app or go to Matrix.com, etc. So the point is have this accessible at all time. Now, this view that I have here is called the home view. To get to the home view, you click on this home icon here. So what's in the home view? The home view tells you what are the items that requires your attention. So we talked about due dates, reminders, and how you might be delegated a task or get updates and so forth. Well, it all shows up here in the alerts. So I have a number here. It tells me that I have tasks that requires my attention. I can click through each of these, right? And I can actually see the task. And as I go through them, I can look at the item details and know exactly what the changes are and why it's popped up. Once I'm done, I can also clear all the old notifications or notification for finished item. And if I get to 0 here, that means I've also achieved inbox 0 with respect to notifications. And now that nothing requires my attention. So when you have a task in Matrix and you set a due date, and then you set those daily reminders, that's how you get alerted on when you need to actually work on it, right? So those daily reminders will pop up here in the alerts, and you're constantly reminded to work on that task. And so when I have a task and I set those daily reminders, I'm constantly reminded all the time that I need to work on that task. And because of that, I don't drop the most important ones. So I recommend that you do those reminders, those recurring reminders, for that reason. Okay, now let me show you some features that's unique inside Teams with Matrix. If you go to a chat with somebody inside Teams, one of the things you can do is open what's called the one-on-one view. So instead of looking at just the list of projects that you have, Matrix allows you to also look at from a people perspective. So as you can see, I open this one-on-one with Eugenia. I can select Eugenia here, and now I see all the tasks I have in common with her across all of my matrices. Let me give you an example why this is so powerful. Let's just say if you're a manager and you're working with your delegate, your direct report, and you're trying to see, hey, are my direct reports working on these other tasks, for client A, or this other task for project B, right? What are the things that are overdue? So by going to the one-on-one and looking at that person, you can actually, the task name, you can see all the tasks that are overdue, regardless of the project they're in, as long as you and that person are in the task together, right? So one of you is the owner, one of you is the delegate. And so when you look at this view, it is so useful, because if you're having a meeting with one another and you're trying to talk through priorities, guess what? You don't have to open Party Matrix and jump to different projects. You can just go down this list, change the due date as needed. And then all the things that are overdue shows up red, allows you to focus your time real quick. Now, to add the one-on-one view, you just simply click on the plus here, choose Party Matrix, and then choose one-on-one view here. Now, if you use Party Matrix and you use Microsoft Teams, I generally recommend that you add this one-on-one for every single one of your direct reports that you work with. And then, select that direct reports. And now it's so helpful because you'll have a lot more efficient meetings and effective meetings, because you can just jump right into the tasks that matter most. Now, let me show you something else too, which is in the chat section with somebody in Teams, one of the things you can do is you can actually convert any message inside Teams into a task as well. So you see how someone might send me a message, could you send me a report? I can hover over this ellipsis here and create PM item. So then if I'm talking to my manager or I'm talking to my direct report, and we're sending message back and forth, and one of them needs to be converted into a task, so easy. I don't have to open Party Matrix. I can just click on that comment. The other thing I can also do is I can actually send Party Matrix task here as action cards. And the whole point of sending action cards is to let the other people see the task, the Party Matrix task, directly inside Teams without having to go to Party Matrix. So let me give an example of when I use this, which is I delegate something to somebody and then crickets, as in I don't hear back from them on the status update. Well, I would go into my Teams app, go down here, select this, and then send that task to them and say, hey, by the way, did you get a chance to see this, right? So that allows them to open up that Party Matrix task and respond to it as needed. So Party Matrix also has integrations with your meetings. We also have integrations with Microsoft Copilot if you're using that at an enterprise level. And then we also have integrations with Microsoft Teams workflow. So that allows you to create all sorts of automations as well. So those are beyond the scope of today's webinar, but I want you to know and be aware that with Party Matrix, you have that infinite flexibility. So with that, I'm going to recap, jump back to my presentation, summarize what we've talked about, and then take a look to see if there's any questions. So if you do have questions, send them in the chat now and I'll take a look. All right, now I'm going to go back to my presentation here and let's summarize what we've talked about. So now it's up to you. It's on you to sign up for Party Matrix if you haven't already. And then if you do use Teams and Outlook, make sure you install the application. As you can tell, you do not need Teams and Outlook to use Party Matrix. But if you do have Teams and Outlook, definitely install them for your account. And then I do recommend, again, to create 3 projects: a personal priorities, a shared team priorities, and key initiative. And then, of course, try out that AI project if you have a specific goal in mind, like, again, getting promoted or something else. And then invite the appropriate team members and pitch them on why it's important to focus on high impact tasks. I can't emphasize this enough, which is Party Matrix is a communication tool, right? And so as a communication tool, what we're doing is we're helping you communicate to others what you think your priorities are. And the whole point is to get a really useful and helpful conversation that's to the point. When you have a meeting inside Party Matrix, I'm sorry, when you have a meeting, a physical meeting in an office, one of the recommendations that I have is project Party Matrix on the big screen. Your conversation will be so much more effective because instead of jumping around and trying to talk through all these different tasks and then realizing afterward that you never got to your most important task, by projecting Party Matrix onto the big screen, everyone can hone in and focus on the key task. And then when you create tasks inside Party Matrix, set due dates. I highly recommend due dates. I highly recommend reminders. And then I highly recommend that you use the quadrants to its full potential, right? Use it to organize the information that you have. And then I also say ruthlessly prioritize. And what that means is that, if you don't prioritize your time, you don't prioritize your tasks, someone else will. So it's up to you to do that part. Some advice, sometimes customers would struggle with managing their task inside Party Matrix because maybe they've created too many. Well, if that's the case, take a step back and track higher impact tasks, right? The things that are actually important. And so use Party Matrix for what it does best, which is to ensure that you are prioritizing the key task. Use your Party Matrix as a communication tool, as I mentioned, with your manager as well as your team members. So think of it as a fractal, right? Your priorities for initiative might have multiple projects, and from that you might have multiple priority level. From each of those priority level, you might have a project associated with more priorities and so forth. And so you might have a matrix that's for tracking priorities with your manager, and then you have a matrix for tracking your priorities, your sub priorities, think of it that way, with each of your direct reports. And so Party Matrix works across all of those levels. And then make sure that you use Party Matrix to manage your individual goals. The root of Party Matrix is in individuals, because I think that, if we can't help you as an individual prioritize your task, what's the point in doing anything else? So hopefully you find Party Matrix useful for that. And so what success with Party Matrix looks like, it will be the one central place to track all your priorities as well as all your team priorities, right? Everyone should be able to know exactly what everyone else is working on. And then if you have repetitive procedures, those are templatized, like I mentioned, to save you time on future work. And then important emails are prioritized and triage and never forgotten. As mentioned, I will have the other webinars that dive deeper into the templates as well as email prioritization. So if you're interested, make sure you sign up for that. And with that, I conclude my presentation. Now, if you have any questions, I'll look at them right now. So someone mentioned that you have audio problem. So don't worry, we'll be sending out the recording of this webinar afterwards. So hopefully you'll get a better better audio quality then. So the other question is security and adding emails that contain customer information. That's a fantastic question. So we have, as mentioned, multiple versions of Party Matrix. So of course you have your standard solution, the SaaS solution. And so in that case, when you do upload the emails, it goes into our system. We also have the HIPAA compliant solution as well as the government cloud solution. So if you use the government cloud solution, for example, when you upload the emails, it actually goes into the government cloud version of our software. And then finally, we also have the ability for you to turn on what's called your Microsoft OneDrive integrations. And so in that particular case, when you upload an email, the EML file is actually uploaded into the administrator's OneDrive account. So if that is helpful in terms of managing security, that's also an option for all our paying customers as well. And then finally, we have an enterprise solution of Party Matrix, which means you can have private deployment and so forth. So there's a bunch of different ways in terms of how you manage the information in Party Matrix. You also have the option when you create a task with email. Let me show you here. Option here. When I go back to my email prioritization and my email Outlook integration, I can actually click on this option here and then choose settings. And from here, I can change the various options. I can upload the message as a body, essentially the message from the email as the body in my item notes. I can attach the original email. So if you attach the EML file, for example, then even if you delete the file from your email account, that email file is still in Matrix and someone else can open it, right? So if you delegate that to somebody else, they can still access it. And then you can also just link the email to Matrix. So then instead of uploading the email into Matrix, it actually gives you the option to link to it, which means if you click on that link, it opens up Matrix. I'm sorry, it opens up your Outlook and jump to that email in the web app. Hopefully that answers your questions around email management and the options there. Great. Are there any other questions? As mentioned, I'll send out the recording for this webinar afterwards. And if you have any questions or use cases, questions, etc., please send us a message. Send me a message, hi@affluence.com or support@affluence.com. We'd be happy to address them. Or if you have questions around our HIPAA compliant Azure government cloud solution or enterprise solution as well. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Hopefully this was helpful.